Hello, I'm Don Surrett, and today we're going to install a Soundtraxx Tsunami 2 and a Bachmann 70 tonner. As it comes from the factory, the Loco runs well and is quiet, but the motor control with the OEM DCC decoder leaves a bit to be desired. I've had very good experiences with Soundtraxx decoders, and the Tsunami 2 has great sound and excellent motor control. A look inside the 70 tonner is encouraging in that the Soundtraxx board is actually smaller than the Bachmann board, and the cab is also good size and should give us room for a speaker and a KeepAlive. Let's get started. Today we're going to install a Tsunami 2 885014 GE diesel Tsunami 2 digital sound decoder from Soundtraxx and a TCS KA2, which is the smallest stay alive or keep alive device that I've been able to find. Other things that we want to have on hand are a decent soldering iron. I have this older Radio Shack digital soldering station, which I've had for a number of years and have found that it works extremely well. Today I just discovered that they still catalog a very similar device, sells for under $100, and also Parts Express carries one from another maker that is in the same price range and has similar features. It controls not only the temperature of the soldering iron tip, but it maintains that temperature under load. It allows you to set it over a range of temperatures depending on the type of solder you're going to use and how heavy your work is. You'll also want the usual array of modeler's knives, pliers, some decent solder. I've got some Kapton tape here, which we'll probably be using later. Another piece of gear that you'll probably want to have on hand is some kind of a meter that we can use to determine the proper polarity of things like our stay alive unit. So let's start by taking the shell off. You'll find that this is quite a straightforward device to open up. We got one little screw that holds the fuel tank on, and then there are two somewhat larger screws that go through the metal frame and up into the body. The mechanism then slides out, and we can set the body shell aside for the time being. Want to put the parts we take off in a small tray or dish or something like that so they don't get lost in the shuffle. The next step, we've got two more small screws that go down through the weight and into the frame. Again, we'll set that aside. And now we have the Bachmann decoder board. Now, for comparison, here's the Tsunami board. And as you can see, it's quite a bit shorter, about the same width, and thickness appears to be comparable. So I think we can work with this. The wiring on the Bachmann board is held on these little plastic tabs that slide over the end of the wires and supposedly hold them tight so they make a good connection. And they usually work pretty well. but we're not going to use them on the new install. So now we've got the board loose. And we only have 4 wires here to take out. We've got a gray wire and an orange wire that go to the motor. Make note of that because this is a standard color code that seems to be pretty much universal. Actually, I said we had 4 wires. We've got 6. 2 off the front truck, 2 off the rear truck. Which ones go where doesn't matter much as long as the red side goes on the red and the black side goes on the black. Whether they're left or right on the board makes no difference to the board. We're pretty much done with this. However, a feature of the Bachmann that I like is the fact that the lights, the backup light on this end is a surface mount LED that's mounted right on the end of the board. And the headlight is in this little plastic bracket. Let's see if I can pull that off. We want to not lose this. The headlight is mounted right to the board. What's nice about this feature is it makes the unit all self-contained. So when everything is said and done, you slide the body on it, the lights come out in the right place. You don't have any wires to fish up into the shell, which on some installs can be kind of a pain. This one, we'd like to retain that feature if possible. Now this is going to be a little tricky because the Tsunami board is shorter, so we're going to have to do something about where we mount our headlight pieces. I'm going to go ahead and take these off of here because we'd like to reuse these. Well, now we've removed the lights from the original decoder board. We can set that aside because we no longer need it. And while you weren't looking, I also removed 3 small ceramic capacitors that were mounted to the motor brushes for probably RFI suppression. These are not important to the function of the locomotive, so we don't need these anymore. They can be removed and discarded. So now we have a fairly clean looking chassis with the 6 wires that we discussed, and looking to mount the Tsunami board, we discover that the mounting points for the original board are almost, but not quite, in the same alignment on the Tsunami as they were on the original board. I think we can utilize the screw on the fireman's side rear and not quite make it with the second one here. So it looks like we need to remove this lug, and what I may elect to do here in the interest of safety is to cut these down flush with the top of the mounting posts here and substitute a small piece of plastic of about the same thickness to space the board off the frame, just to preclude any accidental short circuits between the bottom of the board and the top of the frame. So I'm going to do that now, and I'll be back with you in a couple of minutes after that's done. Well, now I have taken some styrene sheet. I had some 040 styrene, which appears to be about the same height as the boss that we ground off of the frame. I brought these down flush, tried not to go any lower than what we had as a base level before, just smoothed it out. So these 4 pieces will be super glued on here. I've made holes in them to pass the screws from our original Bachmann weight. Now you'll notice that the weight also has protrusions on it that we're going to deal with in the same manner that we did with these, and that is we're going to make them go away using our Dremel and cutoff tool. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to glue these things on here, so we'll be ready to mount the board in the next segment. Well, we now have the 4 pieces of 040 plastic stuck on top of our frame. I've also cut, I thought I was going to use 2 of these pieces of 1/8" tubing to replace the standoffs that we ground off of here. And when I looked at where that was going to come out, it again was almost but not quite in the right alignment to use the screw on the front end of the board. So when the Tsunami is in place, the rear screw will give us the majority of our mechanical integrity, and I'll use a piece of Kapton tape to tape the front end of the weight to hold it centered on here. I have another small piece of 040 styrene that I've glued to the weight, which will stand it above any of the components on the board. If you can see that in there or not, but this should give us clearance so we're not damaging any components on the Tsunami. It gives us one mechanical fastener and then a piece of tape. Cutting the pieces of tubing, I suppose you could measure it, or you could do like I did and cut about 50 of them and then pick out the one that comes the closest to the length that you needed. Okay, so our next step, I think, is to mount the board to the chassis and then start connecting wires. Well, now I have the wires connected from the pickups to the board on both ends. I've wired the leads to the motor. In this case, the orange lead goes to the front, the gray lead to the rear. Next step is fitting a speaker. Now, I've elected to use a cut-down iPhone speaker. I've used these in the past and had pretty good results with them. I suppose with the space that's in the cab, we'd also have room to use perhaps a variety of sugar cube speakers, but I've decided to go with the iPhone speaker because I've got one. So you can see where I've shortened it and closed the end with a piece of styrene. I've also removed the cab from the locomotive to make fitting the speaker a little easier. There are 4 tabs that snap into the frame. These are a little tricky, but with a little judicious poking from the bottom, you'll be able to get it out without breaking the cab. And the speaker will fit up into the cab far enough so you almost won't be able to see it. Now, there's just a little bit of my white plastic showing in the top of the cab window once the speaker is pushed all the way up. So I'm going to paint the end of that black, and I don't think anybody's going to ever spot it. So that's the speaker mount. Well, we're coming down the home stretch now. We've got the lights installed. Now, a word of caution. We wanted to retain the Bachmann configuration of the lights being attached to the chassis rather than being stuffed up in the hood with wires coming down that you have to figure out how to dress when you put the shell on. The caution is that the plus and minus to the LEDs are exactly the opposite on the Bachmann board compared to the Soundtraxx board. So if I can get in here close, you can see I've got the dropping resistor for the LED, which was on the Bachmann board. It's external on the Soundtraxx. That it's wired, you might say, cross-legged compared to just sticking it on the end of the board and using the backup light connections there. The headlight was the same deal, except I was able to just turn the LED upside down and connect it with a dropping resistor to the front. I've tested it out. It works so far. We now just need to put a speaker in it and we'll be ready to program. Well, I've tested and confirmed that the wiring is correct, the lights work, the speaker's now connected. The last step is to find a place to stick our KeepAlive, and as I had planned, it looks like it's going to fit right in behind the weight and on top of the backup light wiring. And I've attached a plug to make it easy to connect. Now, a word of caution here. The KA2 is clearly marked with the black wire with the white stripe being ground and the blue wire being plus 12 volts. The problem is Soundtraxx doesn't tell you which side of the plug is plus. Well, I've saved you the trouble and I've measured it, and the forward pin in the plug is the plus lead. So be very careful when you attach your KeepAlive that you got the polarity correct. If you put it in backwards, pretty sure it won't work, and it could actually damage the KeepAlive and maybe something in the Soundtraxx Tsunami as well. So word to the wise, be careful when you put that plug on. So there we have it, all buttoned up, everything squished inside the shell with no problem at all. I even found a place to put a little bit extra weight, which an engine this size needs all the traction it can get. So we're ready now to put it on the track and program it. That'll be the next video. Okay, here's the completed install. Let's see what we got. And that proves the KeepAlive works.